All right, welcome back. It is time for another live edition of the Force with Friends podcast. And this week we are talking The Last Jedi. So, Kevin, welcome back. It's the
Yeah.
week we've all finally been waiting for. We're going to break
Strong
down The
strong
Last
opinions
Jedi.
on this one.
Yeah, I'd say so. But yeah, here we are. We knew this would happen months ago, and it's kind of crazy to think that it is indeed happening. So, what we're doing, if you are new here, is we are breaking down the story of Star Wars from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, all the way through The Rise of Skywalker. So we're not doing like the TV shows, or we left Rogue One out as well. We cover the information that's pertinent from those episodes, but we're not exactly focusing on those. We're just doing the episodic
Yeah.
trilogy. So we've worked all the way through, and now we are almost to the end of it in episode 8. So, little bit of a background, I guess, for where we're at, just trying to catch everybody up. The First Order has had Starkiller Base destroyed, so the Resistance made the first strike in this battle, at least from where we popped up in the story. Han Solo has died on Starkiller Base. We know that Kylo Ren is Leia and Han Solo's son. Luke had vanished, but now Rey, who is the new Jedi, has found him. And so the Resistance is hoping that he is going to spark what they need to win this war, give them the hope that they need. So that's where we pick up. Kevin, first impressions on this movie. First impressions like the, 30th time.
Yeah, right. I man, I have a lot of conflict about this movie because it does a lot of things wrong. I mean, there's a reason that I think people have a hard time liking it. I saw Andrew's comment in there. This is my favorite Star Wars film, said no one ever, right? Like that's pretty accurate. Um,
Yeah.
I would say though, so having watched it the way we're watching this stuff, it's a little better. Um, I would say if you really don't like the sequels, try to keep a little bit of an open mind
Right,
because I
yeah.
did I did feel like there were some things in there that actually connected really well with the rest of the movies.
Hmm.
Just some things lore wise and continuity wise. There are some things I have a hard time forgiving the movie of.
Yeah.
Um, but if I can look past those things, there are some interesting things in the movie. They just tend to be overshadowed, I think, by the several reasons people tend to gravitate away from it.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was in theaters watching it, I left just not really knowing how I felt. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah,
I was so excited for the movie. The hype leading up to it was through the roof. Like, the Last
yeah,
Jedi trailers are probably the best ones in all of Star Wars. There was parts that were really good, and then there's parts, like you said, that you're like, why? Why did they do that? It's the only Star Wars movie where I left like not sure what I thought, because Episode 7 I knew I loved.
yeah,
9, we left the theater. I was with you. We left the theater kind of laughing at it, like
yep,
what just happened. The prequels, I loved every bit of it, and that's my extent of Star Wars in theaters. Rogue One and Solo too, but this one was kind of ambiguous as to where my feelings were. So parts I really don't like, parts I do like. I've read the book, it's on the shelf back there. The book is great. I suggest reading it if you haven't, because it just so much more insight there.
yeah,
But the way we're going through right now, watching this, I did not enjoy episode 7 that much because I don't think it tied together very well with Star Wars as a whole.
yeah,
But episode 8, I liked it so much better watching it this way, because like you said, there was so many different little things in this one movie that actually did tie in with the 7 movies before it,
yeah,
so much better than 7 did. So for me, I really enjoyed watching episode 8 this time, so that was a pleasant surprise.
yeah. I think I'd agree with that. I think seven just felt so disconnected from the previous
Yeah.
six. It's not like we said it last week. It wasn't a bad movie. It just felt like it was a completely
Mhm.
different thing. Where I feel like this
Yeah.
at least pushes back into that realm of what Star Wars is.
Right.
With some of the things, again, I still have a really hard time with some of the pieces in this movie, so I still don't really know how I feel about it. Um, but it was fun to pick up on some different things, focusing on looking past those things, because that was really what I tried to do. Is all right, I'm going to ignore the things in this movie that I really don't like, and
Right,
just try to
yeah.
focus on what is in this story that's worth looking at.
Big
Um,
picture as a whole,
so
right?
yeah,
So a few comments before we get in. T-Man answered the question. So the title of this video is "Does the Last Jedi fit in?" T-Man hopped in a few hours ago with no, it
straight to
does
the
not
point.
fit in. And then Andrew is in the house. Andrew, thanks for hopping by. So we're gonna break this down into a few different topics. We're gonna be as positive as we can be. This isn't like a bash fest. So if you're
Yeah,
in the chat, like let us know your opinions, but don't be ugly about the movie. Like be honest, let us know what you think. But this isn't like a roast of the Last Jedi. You can check out
yeah,
my debate of that. I do have it. You can find it on my channel. There's some roasting that goes on there, but otherwise, we're gonna go through Rey, Finn, and Poe. We're gonna see Kylo Ren, the Resistance versus the First Order, kind of picking up that battle. And then we're going to talk about Luke Skywalker. And Leia's story will be weaved in throughout this. So we don't have a
yeah,
topic headline for her, but she kind of falls into a few different areas here. So that's going to
yeah.
be what we're doing there. But we're going to start off with Rey, Finn, and Poe. So, Kevin, I know you're kind of opinionated just from what we've been talking about on their story. So, do you want to go ahead and kick this off?
Yeah, sure. This is another. I felt like the opening in Force Awakens was good. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like this was another good opening. Like it starts off really exciting. Um, one of my dream projects I hope we eventually get is some sort of X-wing show, some sort of starfighter show where that's the bulk of it, because I love those scenes. And so coming in on Poe, just like blasting up to this dreadnought and taking out the gun, like all of that's a really fun intro,
Yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
it starts off great and it's exciting. Kind of where we are is Poe's really the only one in action at the moment. Ray's off, right? We pick up with her later. She's gone to find Luke, and then
yeah.
Finn's in a back to suit healing up, and so he pops up a little bit later, um, which is somewhat comical. So they're kind of Finn's recovering, Ray's gone off, and Poe's being a hothead, and that's kind of where we come into the movie. And
Yeah.
um, it won't last long. That they're, I mean, they go their separate ways pretty quickly. Obviously, Ray's already gone, but Finn doesn't stick around too long. I like the opening though. I think it's a good opening. I like the focus on can't remember her name, Rose Tico's sister. Um, That's
Paige
just,
Tico.
yes, thank you. It's just a very Rogue One vibe, right? I love when we focus
Yeah,
on the people who aren't the heroes of our story, who are
yeah.
doing really cool things. So I always like getting to see stuff like that. So I mean, I love the opening. It's just after that, not as much.
Yeah, I thought the opening was great too. So the dynamic they use, so I guess it starts off with the resistance getting away. So you start
Yeah,
with Poe, right? His story. So you've got Poe and he's going and you see okay, he's kind of moving forward in his leadership role, at least in his head he is. But
yeah,
then he's kind of the what does she call him? Haldo, what is a flyboy or something like that?
yeah. She calls him
So
Flyboy. Yeah,
like he's super cocky, kind of the Han Solo type. So he does something that yes, they win the battle, but is it going to help them win the war? No. So we see he has a lot of learning to do. So he
yeah,
gets back to the ship after they blow up and they lose a ton of people, and it starts this transition of okay, here's where Poe is, but then the next thing is BB-8 tells him there's Finn and like a back to suit or whatever. They make some joke about it, but
yeah,
you go to Finn, and then okay, you see he's alive, right? That was the question after the Force Awakens, because all you
yeah.
see at the end of the movie is him kind of being whisked away. And so, okay, Finn's alive, he's healed up, and his first question is, "Where's Ray?" So
Hmm.
his heart is kind of still where it has been, and I thought the transitions were really good, where it goes Poe, Finn, Ray, and then the Ray part it kind of builds up on hers, and then it takes you to Kylo Ren. Like it builds up the Luke story and gets you to there. So I really liked how they handled all those transitions. I thought it was good as it filmmaking, I guess, is that the right word there?
Yeah, no, I think it does briefly touch on kind of all the main players in a way that sets up where they
Yeah.
are. In a way, I mean, again, I feel like it sets it up on an interesting path. Um, the big cliffhanger at the end of Force Awakens is right where we pick up on Rey. So obviously everybody's kind of waiting on that moment. And then seeing Kylo Ren kind of recovering from this defeat and having to face Snoke. Um, and he, gets pretty pretty heavily criticized.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it does set up these characters to move forward in a good way. And some of them do, right? There are some genuinely good arcs. I like Poe's arc in this story.
Hmm.
I think it's genuine and I think it's good. He's a very reluctant learner through the majority of this movie until it finally clicks
Yeah.
with him.
Yeah.
So I like his arc. Again, Kylo Ren continues to be a pretty interesting character.
Yep.
Finn's arc kind of goes nowhere, but we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. So for Poe, I like his a lot too. So we kind of talked about it. He goes headstrong into everything.
Yeah,
He's very much okay. There's a problem in front of me. Permission to hop in an X-wing and blow it up. I think that's his exact line. So and
yeah,
Leia's trying to teach him there's more than just that. And so his development goes okay. There's more than just that, but he gets demoted and he keeps just fixing, like, oh, okay, she's bad. Let's take her out. Or, oh, we need to get Rey somewhere else and also onto that ship. So, Finn, you go do this. It's just like fixing a symptom and not getting to the
yeah,
issue. That's what he does the whole movie. And then finally at the end, when they explain to him what Haldo is doing, it kind of clicks. And so when they're on Crate and he says, like, they're going towards that big battering ram laser thing, and he's like, no fallback. Like, that's the issue in
yeah,
front of us, but there's bigger issues down the road. So he tells everybody to fall back. So his leadership style, whatever, in this movie has a great arc from start to finish, I think.
yeah. And I think Oscar Isaacs does a great job of portraying the character because he does get to shine in this role because there's a lot of Poe in this movie.
Yeah.
Um, and I do think the attention to his arc is really well done. I think it's one of the better parts of the movie and one of the better storylines that really makes sense and follows. I mean,
Yeah.
genuinely, just it's a good
Mhm.
storyline for him, and so I
No,
think
it
it was
is.
good.
Especially
But
considering he wasn't supposed to make it past the first 15 minutes of The Force Awakens. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
yeah,
JJ had wrote him
yeah,
off. So
yeah,
yeah, or Poe, we can say, has a very neat, put a bow on
yeah.
it story. Really, from 7 to 9, we'll get to that. But in 8, very
Hmm.
much so. There's a lot of growth for him, and that's what you want to see in these middle movies. You want to see a lot of growth.
Yep.
Then let's go ahead and go to Finn here. Finn kind of gets the short end of the stick, really,
He
this whole
does.
sequel. I mean, not just here, but the whole sequel. Like in 7, we get the rogue stormtrooper, and he's leading kind of this deal to really he just wants to save Rey, but he's right in the thick of it. He gets hurt fighting Kylo Ren, and then he's back,
Yeah,
and you kind of relegate him to sending him off to Canto Bight and just all these kind of pointless things. He doesn't grow a lot. Nothing. I mean, he's a player, but to what end? I don't know. I just don't like how they handled him in this movie, really in the trilogy. But he certainly got hosed, and John Boyega will be the first to tell you that that he got hosed as
yeah.
well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it feels like I mean, we talked about this. It feels like he takes steps back in this film, right? Like he had some good moments in the first film where he pushes
Mm,
past his fear and his unwillingness to confront the Empire. And now he's like, I mean, granted, he thinks he's helping Rey, but here he is ready to like jet again, right?
yeah,
And they really do the same thing with Rose. I actually really like Rose's intro. I think she's a funny, quirky character right there at the beginning, but then immediately just gets like sidelined as tag along. And there you could remove their arc from this movie and it doesn't change anything. Like nothing about the big moments of the movie change because of their arc because they don't succeed in anything, right? They end up
yeah.
getting caught. They end
Yeah,
up
nothing goes
escaping,
right for
but
him.
in no way does it impact what the rest of everyone else is doing. And so
Yep.
it's really frustrating because Finn really had the potential to be a really interesting character,
Yeah,
um, and just got wasted in this movie. So that's frustrating. Uh,
for sure.
doesn't go anywhere.
So SPC Unleashed, Austin is in the building. Kylo Ren is peak in this film for sure.
Yeah,
And then this is the
it's
worst
good.
portrayal of Finn. He was built up so well in The Force Awakens. Joke in
Yep.
this, and okay, yeah, that's like the best
I
way
agree
to put it.
100%. Yeah,
Yep,
it's
not
it's sad.
yeah, not fair for him, especially given the build up for his character in Seven. But Ray, on the other hand, you and I kind of had differing opinions on her in this movie. So
You
in
brought me over a
Seven,
little bit.
so in Seven, she's like the surprise, right? Like she wasn't
Yeah,
billed as the main character in the promos or anything, but then
yeah,
she is the main character, and I thought she was great in Seven. Her character is so interesting, and then in Eight, you kind of watch her wrestle with this "Who am I?" question because that was sprinkled in here and there in Seven, where Maz says, "Who's
yeah,
the girl?" and everyone's just kind of interested and then obviously you learn you can use the force at the end, so ups the interest level, like, oh, who is she? And for 2 years we speculated who is Ray. Like, you can go watch all the
yeah,
videos. Star Wars Theories channel, like, he started right around The Force Awakens, and I would say some of his best content as far as getting him going was probably the Ray speculation stuff. Like,
yeah,
it was so great. That's when I started watching his channel. And so her story here really, if you were hoping she was somebody, it kind of let you down because she has to wrestle with the fact that she is enough. She's a
yeah,
nobody, and it really doesn't matter in the scheme of things. And that's kind of the lesson she has to learn. So it's not the force and the training with Luke that gets her. We talked a little bit about it. It's almost as if she trains Luke, which is, I don't know how I feel about that, but that's kind of what happens.
yeah,
But she also is starting to reel Kylo Ren back to the light side. So she's almost like this mediator in this film, which is interesting to see for the main character coming into the middle arc, that she would be the one who is kind of this, I don't want to say a constant, but she's pulling Kylo Ren back to the light. She's pulling Luke back into the fight. She's giving the resistance hope. It's almost like she's the supporting role to every character in the film, which is a pretty interesting thing to see out of your main character.
yeah. I it, I don't mind the arc of her kind of having to deal with this like feeling of where she fits in, right? That's kind of what
Right.
she asked Luke. She's like, "Where do I fit into all this? Like, what is my
Yeah, she
place in all
says
this?"
that word for word.
Trying to figure out. She has that weird moment in the dark side cave, which to me was a little odd.
It
Um,
was.
I guess the point of that is she's a copy, right? She's not unique. There's a bunch of I don't know. I had a hard time interpreting that.
Well,
That would
it
be my
was it
guess.
was just that she is her, right? Like, she wanted to know who her
Yeah,
parents was, but then it's
yeah,
just she's Ray. Like, that's what
she's
I
Ray.
kind of took from it.
So I think it was important for her to get to that point of moving past that, but I think my issue with it is I feel like I can't point to anything in this movie that helps her get to that. I feel like she
Yeah,
just kind of arrives there.
she
And that's
does.
where I'm disappointed with the interaction with Luke because I feel like if anything, she could have gotten something from that, but she doesn't. She doesn't really learn anything there. She kind of goes on and it just kind of clicks. That would be my only criticism. I think the learning is important, and I think the lesson she learns is critical to her character. I just don't know
Yeah,
why she learned it or how she learned it.
right. And
Um,
then they don't carry it on in the next movie, but we'll get there.
and I do like that she's a lot like Luke in this movie in that she's still very naive. She
Yes.
believes that it's interesting that her and Kylo Ren both have this perception of each other that they're going to switch, right? I
Hmm.
think they see
Yeah.
them in this connection standing together, which they do, right? Like they stand and fight together in the throne room, but I don't think either one fully acknowledges or understands that it's not ending the way they think it is. I think Ray thinks she's going to pull him back to the light, just like Luke was so confident about Vader going into Empire and gets defeated. But really, we see, and we'll talk about Kylo, but he's really building up resolve to also be somebody, right? To get Pat, he does it very differently, but conquering this fear of being nobody by, well, you know what? I'm going to take this position, right? This guy who's in
Yeah.
control of me, I'm going to wipe him out. And
Yeah.
so I think they have the same issue, and it's really cool how they handle it in very different ways. Um, but yeah, I think Ray thinks she's pulling him back to the light. I think she's confident in that, but really, and we'll talk about it, but I think Kylo ends up more solidified in his commitment to being the big bad guy, the Vader, than he was at the start of the movie, which is interesting.
No, I
But yeah,
think yeah, I think that's a good point. Just kind of to wrap up where Ray, Finn, and Poe find themselves at the end of the movie. Again, Poe is the wiser leader. We're gonna see his
yeah,
position is reinstated or whatever. I guess you can say Finn is not running away from the fight anymore. If anything, like he's ready to die for the cause at the end of it. So I guess that's something. And then Ray, obviously, she's gonna be the force sensitive Jedi. She's essentially a Jedi
yep.
at this point for all intents and purposes. Similar to Luke at the end of episode 5. He wasn't a Jedi, but he was their hope. So I think that's interesting. Moving in though to the next section, unless you have anything to add there, I think we can move into Kylo Ren's story, which is super
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and I think it'll intermingle with some of those characters again. So
Yeah. So Kylo Ren, when we've already discussed it a little, he comes into this movie almost like a shell of himself from what we saw
mhm.
in 7. He's killed Han Solo, and now he's got to go to Snoke and be like, I killed Han Solo, and Snoke tells him it's not enough. He was bested by a girl who had
Yeah,
never held a lightsaber. So it's like even at his worst, trying to be as bad as he can be, it's not enough to feed the machine, and he has to learn that. And so we see all his emotional swings and everything, but he
yeah.
still has that connection with Ray, and that's very interesting because he's a very compelling bad guy because you don't really think he's a bad guy for probably half the movie because he's just a person that Ray's talking to. And
Mm.
I think we get the most Kylo Ren growth in this movie out of all 3 of them.
Yeah, he does have a really interesting arc. I love seeing Snoke admonishing him because it really echoes like Anakin's fall in a lot of ways. You know, with Palpatine constantly pushing his buttons of fear and like, hey, you're going to lose this. Yeah, Anakin's thing was he didn't want to lose what was important to him, and he never felt strong enough, and so Sidious gave him that option.
Yeah.
Here, that's not Kylo Ren's issue. Kylo Ren's issue is he's been in the shadow of Luke Skywalker and wants to be somebody, right? He wants to make his own
Yeah.
path. And so here's Snoke just pushing those buttons like, well, you're not good enough. You haven't done enough. Just really driving home that fear and that bitter,
Yeah.
like all those dark side things that he wants Kylo Ren to feed off of. Um, and he's such an interesting character because he has to fight it so hard, right? Like we saw in the first movie, he has a very strong inclination to return to the light side. And
He
so
does. Yeah.
anytime he's doing these things, he really has to like fight hard to be the bad guy. It's like he's so
Uh-huh.
determined. And I think he acknowledges he's not strong enough to resist it. And so his solution is like, well, I'll just get rid of all these things, right? They kill my father. He almost killed Leia, right? Couldn't pull the trigger on her.
Yeah, he
Um,
pulls back. Yeah.
he suddenly loses his mind when he sees Luke again, right? Like
Yeah.
I think he's very well aware of this weakness in him, and like the only way he knows how to solve it is by forcibly removing them from his path. I think that's
Kill
what
kill
he
kill the
sees as his.
past.
Yeah, and he says it right. I think that's his only route because I think there's too much in him that doesn't want to do it, um,
Yeah.
which makes him a really interesting character.
It does. And so I think cuz we'll touch a little bit on this with Luke too.
Yeah,
But the turning point for Kylo Ren in this story, or at least the empathy building point, is Luke tells the story on what happened with him and Kylo Ren.
yeah,
And you hear, he's bad and he's got some, the seed planted in his mind or whatever. And
right.
so then he attacks Luke and destroys everything. Well, then you hear Kylo Ren's side of the story, and you're like, well, that's not exactly how it went down,
Yeah,
So Luke was standing over him with a lightsaber, and you're like, oh, that's a really terrible thing. Like his uncle was about to kill him, and so if he's dealing with all these issues, and then now he sees this happening, he has to feel like he doesn't belong if his own family member is there to get rid of him. And so
yeah,
then Luke's like, yeah, that is how it happened. That's what I was doing. And so you have this huge empathetic point. Then he kills Snoke, and you're like, man, is this really going to happen? Is he going to turn full on to the light here? And the next movie is going to be Ben Solo and Rey, and then just like that, nope, he's bad again. He's only interested in Rey and power,
Yeah.
and that's not what she's interested in. She's wanting back in the fight, and he wants to leave all that behind because it's genuinely tormenting him. Both sides of it. He wants nothing to do with either of it. And so
Yeah.
that's just like a lot of twists and turns for one character in one movie, especially for the bad guy.
Yeah, and if there's one thing I can lament about this movie is we know nothing about his fall to the dark side other than that singular moment, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know where it would have come, but like I just wish we had, because they allude to it. Like Luke had
Yeah.
sensed kind of the darkness in his heart. We saw in the first movie that Luke or Han and Leia were worried about him kind of drifting to the dark side and sent him away with
Mm-hmm.
Luke. And we know in some way Snoke had been already corrupting him, but we like just
Yep.
know very little about all that. And so
So the
I
comics
just wish
cover
I
it
had
in
some of those
detail.
pictures. I know they pick up
Yeah.
after that though, don't they? Or is it before
Before
too?
it's
Oh, it is
it's the
before too.
events
Okay,
leading up to it, so you get a little bit of a time jump and everything, and then immediately after it. So
I got
it's
you.
super interesting. I have them. I can share them with you at some point. They're pretty good
Yeah, I think that's one thing that would have been better to figure out some way to have it in the movie, because I
on
think it's
screen.
important. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
really, really important to see, and because I haven't read those comics, but to
yeah,
see how Snoke wormed his way into Kylo Ren, right? Like how he got
yeah,
to the point where when Ren sees, or when Ben sees Luke standing over him, his first inclination is, this is happening. Snoke was right. I got to go. Like what
yeah,
built up to that? I feel like having some of that in the movie would have benefited it. Because
yeah.
that's a crazy scene.
There's a lot that happens off screen in the sequels that really should have
Yeah,
happened on screen. I think
agreed.
that's a fair point. But at the end of this, I really like where Kylo Ren is like, no, I am gonna be the bad guy. Now
Yeah,
nine, it goes in a different direction, obviously. Whatever, we'll get to that. But seeing him go from bad to ambiguous to like definitely bad, I thought his character had a really nice film as well.
yeah, and I think because you're right, you have all those scenes with him and Ray where he's just a person, right? Like
Yep.
he's who he is, she's who she is, and they're figuring out that they have these things in common about
Right.
these feelings of being alone and and trying to figure out where they fit in. And as the viewer, it's easy to look at that and think of him softening, but you know, I don't think he ever loses his commitment to being this bad guy. I think we see a
No.
human side of a bad guy who's trying hard to be a bad guy, but it does. Some of those scenes are weird. The Raylo scenes where they're
The
connecting.
hand touch.
Yeah. Brittany was like, "What is this? Like what?" So,
Speaking of
uh,
fitting in with the other Star Wars, I mean that is straight out of the Anakin Skywalker awkward book. That little
yes,
hand touching
yeah,
thing. It's like they're middle schoolers.
yeah. And so for the most part, I think those scenes are good. I do think they could have done more with them other than just a lot of staring at each other. So,
Yeah.
but I think
No,
they
that's
serve
true.
their purpose well. I think they humanize him in a way that's really important to drive home the point that just because he has these issues and he's connecting with this person, it doesn't mean he's suddenly going to choose things differently, right? Like
Yeah.
emotions are very complicated, and he's committed to doing this thing the way he wants to do it. So,
Yep.
yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. So let's move on because we've hit the good guys, we've hit the bad guys. Let's actually talk about this battle between the good guys and the bad guys. So where
yeah,
we pick up with the resistance in the first order, this is one of my bigger complaints of the sequel trilogy is just it's a story based on the resistance in the first order, but we know relatively little about either. So I have a hard time buying into this
mm,
other than we just know first order's bad, resistance is good. The New
that's a good
Republic
point.
funded the good guys. That's like all we know. And we
Yeah,
talked about it a little bit last week, but when you look at the timeline of this movie, this is like a few days after episode 7. So they have just taken out Starkiller Base. You would think doing pretty good. But 5 minutes before they took out Starkiller Base took out the whole New Republic. So, like, very strange dynamic going on
yeah,
here. And so you get this First Order I think the opening crawl says the First Order reigns or something like that. And I'm like, well, that's a stretch considering what just happened. But then like, oh no,
Yeah.
they did blow up the whole New Republic, so I guess they do reign. There's just not enough story there. But
Yeah.
essentially, we get that Empire Strikes Back picture, which I think is kind of what Ryan Johnson was going
Yeah.
for. Is the bad guys, took the punch in the first movie, but they're delivering back in this one, and they've got more money, more resources, more power, so
Yeah.
they're flexing it here. They use the plot device of the hyperspace tracking to keep the tension up. I thought it paced the movie very well, and it did show how much further ahead they
Yeah.
were. But to me, I just don't really like the whole First Order resistance dynamic that's going on.
Yeah. The Empire does have all the new toys. They have lots of cool new technology and some pretty cool new ships. Uh,
Yes, they do.
I I think it's jarring because you open up on this scene where they're chasing them, and you find out like this is the remainder of the rebellion. It's like, wait, this is it?
There's
Like these four
400
ships?
of them,
Like
four ships and 400 people.
because it's just odd to me because I feel like they would have needed to establish that in the first movie. They're like, hey, this really isn't a big thing, right? Because you you just kind of get the impression that it's a fairly well funded thing, right? They're trying to fight back. I know the Republic doesn't want to be the face of it, but it's a bit odd that all of a sudden, like in the whole galaxy, we have 400 suddenly have 400 people left in this rebellion. Um,
Yes.
like how effective were you at the beginning? Like, I mean, because that's I don't know. I felt like they were trying to make it very dramatic and seem very like the final moments of the rebellion, which I get that, but it's all of a sudden. I think was kind of to your point, like just there's this massive dynamic shift. So
I'm trying to
it
find the book on my shelf. Resistance Reborn. It's another thing explained off screen. Party foul. You can't explain all these things off screen, but
yeah,
apparently the First Order has been locking away all these people or killing all these people who were in the rebellion or sympathized with
mm,
them. So the whole idea around only 400 and nobody answering the call is the fact that the First Order has locked them all up or killed them all. It's like, well, again, we need to know that for this to make sense.
yeah. And I'm fine with nobody answering the call, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
go to a cause that you think is hopeless and things look hopeless. But the
Yeah.
fact that all of a sudden they've dwindled to this very insignificant number, right? Like, I mean, how many people does the First Order have right now?
Tens
so
of thousands.
that's it's a very very crazy margin that just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it just kind of it does make it a little bit unbelievable. But
Yes. And
that's a
and
minor,
also, yeah, I mean,
obviously.
there's not a ton to touch on here, but I did think kind of the inconsistency, lack of
Yeah.
direction was worth noting. Also, it was interesting that their whole hope came off of Finn going to a casino planet to get a code breaker to turn off the hyperspace tracking so they could get away. Like that whole idea to me is flawed anyways, because okay, you turn off hyperspace tracking and you jump somewhere, like they're going to find you again and you still only have 400 people. So
Yeah.
where are we going here? You know what I mean? So to me that's an issue that I don't think they explained well enough. And so maybe you need more Jedi than just one to eventually take this down. but
Yeah.
but that's kind of the direction they went. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but to be honest with you, I think they just needed something to do with Finn, right? Like I mean that whole arc never felt like it was a well thought out part of this story. I think they just needed
No.
Finn to go somewhere and do something. And I think that's what it was,
No.
unfortunately. So
So kind of to wrap this section up, obviously the the good guys lose. Very
yeah.
much like Empire Strikes Back. The good guys lose. That's the tone they were going for. I'm okay with it. I again do not like the whole dynamic going on here. But
Yeah.
they lose. There's still kind of this feeling of hope because Leia's like, we've got everything we need. There's like 8 of us in this ship, like this
Yeah.
is gonna be enough. But it leaves you there and you leave on the note of okay, the First Order has really got things going and the Resistance really doesn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how they pull this off. So that's where the war aspect leaves here. And I'm okay with leaving on that note of understanding both of those things. I just
Yeah.
don't like how we got to the point of understanding those,
Yeah. I think that's
to say
fair.
that diplomatically.
Yeah. That's fair.
So the main event, this is the one that obviously gets the people most fired up, is how this movie portrayed Luke Skywalker. So
Yeah.
I'm in the camp where like it's not what I would have chosen to do, but I don't mind it. 5 years later, however, 6 years, right? It's been six
Mm.
years. This upcoming year would have been six. So yeah, it's been a while. I'm growing to understand it or reconcile it more. There's some people very much so hate it and will never like the Luke Skywalker part.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your take on it.
I I don't like it, but a part of me is kind of like I know that some people have, they've written off Disney and Star Wars because of this singular thing, right? It's been for some people it's been pretty rough, and I get why. I mean,
It's
because
a
this
big
is a
deal.
character. It is. It's a huge deal, right? This is an iconic character of the franchise, and when you feel like they aren't honored and handled the right way, that's frustrating. I think.
It's an iconic character in film, not just the
Yeah.
franchise, like
No, just in general, in
cinematic
culture. Yeah.
history.
Right.
And so, yeah,
And my issue is not even that Luke has this conundrum, that he has this period where he's struggling, right? Like he's very much human. Like I don't expect him to always make the perfect right decision. Just the nature of what he does. I mean, I guess we're going to complain about this briefly and then we'll move on. Um,
no, go ahead. Yeah, it's fair
it
game.
it's just we talked about it today. Like we've seen Jedi go into exile before, right? Yoda goes into exile,
Hmm.
Obi-Wan goes into exile. Yoda goes into exile for his safety, right? Like he's trying to stay hidden because he plans to be a part of something later on, right? Like
Hmm.
he's hoping that something will come to fruition, especially with these twins, right? Obi-Wan is obviously in exile looking after Luke, who you
Yeah.
could argue has had a much more traumatic experience than Luke did. I mean, with the whole Anakin fiasco, and
Well,
so he's
even
yeah, go
more
ahead.
than that. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say even more than
oh,
that. Qui
absolutely.
Gon, what's her name? The woman he loves in Clone Wars.
Satine,
Satine,
right?
Anakin,
No, am I thinking of the wrong person?
Satine. It's Bo
Is it?
Katan's sister,
Okay,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
So her, Anakin again, and Kenobi. He has to see
yeah.
Leia and Luke, like things like that. You're spot on there.
But the thing, and he's broken and messed up. But when this call comes to help Leia, he goes and he does it, right? And it's actually kind of healing for him. Whereas
Yeah,
this exile of Luke, it just doesn't make any sense, right?
it's
Like he's
bitter, right?
chosen to leave, he's chosen to abandon things just completely with no plan to come back, right? To no plan to just rest and figure things out. Like when Ray comes calling, is like, hey, there's issues. He's like, don't care, not part of it, don't want any of it, right? And I think that's the core of where every time I watch this movie, it just hurts my heart a little bit because I was like, but that's not right, right? Like that's not what a Jedi
Yeah.
does. That's not what Luke Skywalker does. So I don't even have an issue with his moment of weakness where he's standing over Ben with a lightsaber. I feel like that's understandable, right? In a
I'm
moment of
okay with
fear
that.
and
Yeah.
instinct, you just react and then you realize, oh, what am I doing? Again, that's human. Um, man, it's just that apathetic attitude to who else is suffering in the galaxy. That's what gets
Yeah.
me. And so I don't know if I can ever watch this movie without this bothering me, but I am at the point where I think I just love the rest of Star Wars too much to just say, "Well, I'm done with Star Wars," So uh,
Right.
I'll move past it, and I'm glad I have because there's some really cool things that happen in this movie with Luke.
Yeah.
I just have to ignore that because it gets me.
Yeah, I mean, it bugs me the fact that like when he throws the lightsaber, that's my biggest issue. I'm really after reading the book, watching a lot, like I said, I'm okay with a lot of it, like him
Yeah,
failing and thinking that he's more of an issue, so he just decides to go hide himself
yeah,
rather than cause more problems. Like that's kind of a relatable thing for a lot of people. So
sure.
I think that's a connection point with the audience, at least some people in the audience. So I'm
Yeah,
okay with that.
That's
I'm
fair. Yeah.
okay with the fact that he's kind of in this depression because he's human. It is what it is. I'm okay that he's kind of mean to Ray when she gets there because last thing he wants to see is another
Yeah.
Jedi showing up for him to goof up. So
Yeah.
all that's fine. He's bitter. He's certainly not over what happened. I mean, he brought all of the darkness to an end pretty much singularly, and then he, on the other hand, singularly brings it all back in his own mind. So
Yeah.
that's a lot, right? That's a whole lot. The Jedi
It
themselves
is.
back in the prequels, they can't say that. They had no thing to nothing to do with the darkness going away. If anything, they let it back in under their nose. But
Yeah.
Luke caused it with his actions. So I'm okay with that. Do
That's
I
fair.
like that? Do I like that Luke's the one that caused it with his actions? Not really. But I'm okay with all that. That's all super relatable. But watching Luke go in this movie from out of the fight to doing the Obi-Wan thing, doing the Kanan thing where he's like, "No, I'm back in this fight and I'm going to use every last bit of whatever I have to make sure that it goes on and give them this spark of hope." Be Luke Skywalker, a legend that goes and stands down the First Order with a laser sword. I think that's what he says.
Yeah.
I love it. Like planting that little seed early, and then that's exactly what he does, and it works. The force projection thing, to me, that's neither here nor there. I don't think that's the coolest use of force powers or whatever, but they had to get
No.
him there without a ship, so that's what
Right.
they did. But it's cool to see his character go from that point, and I think Ray teaches him a lot, but then Yoda getting him back in, and then Leia speaking to him as well in that
Yeah.
one moment, because right, he turns himself back onto the Force and he wakes Leia
Yeah.
up or something like that. And then he's gonna go get rid of the Jedi text, and Yoda like teaches him that big lesson, and that's an awesome scene. I know you have a good bit to say about that. I think
Love
it's
it.
cool watching Luke grow up in one movie to that point of resolve that he has.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair a fair way to look at it because I don't necessarily like how he got here. Um and I have issues with whether he would have got there, but I do think that he goes through a very good arc where he's at, right? In terms of how he comes out of this thing and how he decides to change what he's doing.
Yeah,
So I think his arc in this story is good. I think Luke's path in this movie is good. Um, I just have to get past the fact that he's there, right? And
yeah,
that
yeah.
may just me be being selfish, right? Like you said, I mean, because again, it's very understandable stuff. He's been through a lot, as you
It's
mentioned.
not
I think that's
selfish.
I no, but I mean, it's a fair way to look at it
Yeah.
to say, well, this is how people respond in reality. That so
Someone actually
um,
commented on
I'll give you
something
that.
I posted about that, and they were like, it was like a Mark Hamill interview where it's talking about like
Mhm.
Luke being relatable, and someone said like, yeah, and then they killed him in Disney, and he was the most unrelatable, and some guy was like, no, like this is how depressed people sometimes deal with things, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh, like okay, it's a little bit deeper than just they ruined my Luke Skywalker. Well, maybe Luke had human issues. I'm near certain that's not what Ryan Johnson was going for, but
mhm,
at the same time, people took it that way, so that's kind of cool, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, no, I think when I said it was selfish, I think I meant just like going into this movie, you had like this idea of what it was going to be like to have Luke Skywalker
Yeah,
back on screen. The things you would see
yeah,
him do and accomplish, right? Like
yep,
just going back to that OT trilogy of just how great it was.
yeah,
Um and so I think that's where maybe eventually I'll get past it because it's not a bad story for him. It's not it's just not
just kind of out of nowhere.
it is. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still conflicted about it, I guess.
I'm hoping,
I like
and
your perspective on it though. I think that's a good perspective.
it's helped me, I guess. I still don't. Again, I don't. It's not what I would have chosen. Like I would
Sure.
much rather have seen Luke go to the fight, and I'm fine with him
Yeah.
dying in this movie. That's
Yeah.
certainly Star Wars at its core. Obi-Wan does the
Yeah.
same thing to buy time for the rebellion. Kanan does the same thing to buy time for the rebellion. That
Yeah.
is as Star Wars as it gets. But I would have done the 2 hours prior to that maybe a little bit differently. Like
Yeah.
maybe when R2 shows that message from Leia and it's like the original one from 4, that's what kind of gets him back into it, but I would have rather him been more into it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I understand where people are mad. I understand where some people like it.
Yeah,
It's going to be
agreed.
polarizing forever. So
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
think I'm
I'm
just in
going
the
to
middle there.
convince.
I think I'm
Yeah.
just somewhere in the middle. So
And so in the book too, I'll throw this in the book when he dies and he's doing like that force projection thing,
yeah.
there's a voice talking to him, telling him like it's okay to let go and
Hmm.
like you've accomplished whatever. And it doesn't tell you who the voice is, but it just says like let go, Luke. And so I so badly want to think that was Anakin. And I think there would have been a lot more goodwill in the movie had they just went ahead and thrown Force Ghost Hayden right behind him, telling him that on screen. And I think people
Yeah,
would have overlooked a lot of transgressions if that was on scene or on the screen.
yeah, I agree, and that'll kind of segue into some other stuff because there's a lot that ties back into the prequel trilogy here, like a lot that ties back into some of the lessons and the falls and
Yeah,
um, a lot of natural places to connect this back to Anakin Skywalker, whose name is literally never mentioned. But
it's
there's
not
some good
mentioned, but
stuff
it
in
is
here.
alluded to.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is like they clearly made an effort to make some of those connections. I love that
Yeah,
Luke is like he's realizing who the Jedi were and what
he blames
happened with the
Obi-Wan
fall. Yeah, like blames all of them, and he blames
to
um
blame himself, like he's lumping it all
yeah.
in. But
And we talked about this today, like just the idea that maybe Luke's made the same mistake, right? In being so worried about the future and Ben's future, he missed
yeah,
his fall. Like he missed that darkness creeping
yep,
in. The same way the council was so worried about Anakin where he was going to be as the chosen one, they weren't there to help him, right? And his fall
yeah.
happened right under their noses. And so
Textbook
you got to
Jedi.
yeah, yeah, textbook Jedi. And Luke is so committed, it seems like, to these books, right? Especially in the first part of this movie. Like he's very
Mhm.
protective of them. He's like, this is all that remains of the Jedi, right? And so he's operating. It feels like really a lot of the way the Jedi Council did is like, well, this is what has to be followed, right? Like these are the rules and guidelines. We can't stray from them.
Yeah.
And just getting
And they goofed him up. Yeah.
caught up so much in the code and the rules and how to teach and how to train that you forget that you're training people, right? And so that was the Jedi
Yep.
Council's mistake is they forgot Anakin was a person. So I love that stuff that's in this movie and these
Yeah.
allusions back to that. Um, and then of course the best part of the movie is him and Yoda to me. Like that scene where they're
Easy.
sitting there talking
Yep.
is
Easy.
so great, and that's one of my favorite. That redeems a lot of this movie for me. Um, just because there's so much good stuff in that conversation. I don't know if you have anything to say about it.
I was just gonna say it's almost like if you want to look at it from this point of view, to where Luke doesn't finish his training with Yoda, he goes back and Yoda pretty much dies, and Yoda's like, you've got to face Vader and you'll be a Jedi. But it's his training was finished. He does it, but it's almost like Yoda gets to come back and give Luke the final say. Like,
Yeah,
hey, this is the end of your training. And so what does he say? They are what
well,
there's a phrase,
we are what they move beyond, or
we
something,
are what
right?
they move
No,
beyond.
is that what it was? Yeah,
Yeah, it's that's so deep. Like
it
it's a
is. Man, what
very
a great
Yoda thing.
line!
Yeah.
Such a great line, right? The idea that all that you are as a person, your successes and your failures, lead up to them being able to be better than you. Like
Yep.
that's such a great line.
It's so genius. And also, that scene is a full circle arc for Yoda. So we get
Yeah,
Yoda in the prequels essentially leading them to their failure. You get
yeah,
Yoda in the original trilogy. He's barely there, but he trains Luke and sets him on the right path and everything, but you get very little. But in this one moment, we see Yoda blows up the Jedi text. So he's like, "Hey,
laughing
forget it,
maniacally.
it never worked." And so
Yeah,
he gets rid of those, and he's like, page turners, they were not, stuff like that. And then he gives that line, and Luke like, oh, I get it now. And so his full circle is like he gets Luke back into the fight.
yeah,
Luke gives the resistance, I about called him the rebellion, the resistance hope. And
hmm,
then that kind of spurs whatever happens in the next movie. So it's
yeah.
it's a consequential scene.
It is. I love one of the things Yoda says is, he says he's like, I told you, you have to pass on what you learned, right?
Yeah.
This idea that what you've learned about being a Jedi is far more important than what's in those books, right? And like
Hmm.
that's what Yoda's doing too, because it makes me think back to episode two, or no, episode two, gosh, episode five.
Five. Yeah.
Um,
The first episode too.
yeah, where he tells him you have to unlearn what you've learned, right? Which
Hmm.
is it's totally what Yoda's done. Like, because Yoda says this thing to him that is
Yeah.
so Qui-Gon, where he's like, "You're still looking to the future and you're ignoring the moment," which is
Hmm.
literally what Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan in
Obi-Wan.
Episode One, right?
Yep.
And so, which was a very not Jedi Council thing. They were constantly looking ahead to try to worry about what was next and how to manipulate what was next and how to protect what was next. And so,
Yeah.
even Yoda has gone through this process of unlearning to be better, and he's passing that on to Luke, and he's passing on what he's learned that's not in a book, but that he's gleaned from another Jedi, and now Luke's going to do the same thing. So it's such a cool sequence, and it's such a cool moment that touches on
Hmm.
a lot of different characters and moments throughout Star Wars.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of that I feel like I missed because I was mad at the movie previously. So
Yes. And so also, I think it's genius. This isn't story wise, but Ryan Johnson made some boneheaded decisions in this
yeah,
movie. But going
yeah,
with Puppet Yoda was not one of them.
yeah,
That was smart. I loved that.
yeah.
That was,
And
I
I
mean,
love that he's
chef's
still
kiss.
kind of the crazy Yoda too. Like, he's not
Yeah,
even
with the
back to
crazy hair
stoic
and
prequel Yoda. He's
yeah,
laughing as he burns the tree.
yeah. I like
Yeah,
that too.
it's so good. And so I guess leading into Skywalker's death, I guess the last thing I would say, because it ties back into Yoda,
Yeah,
um, is that scene where Rey's talking to Leia at the end about Luke
at the
dying,
very end. Yeah,
and she says, he wasn't afraid, or I can't remember what her exact words were, but she basically says he was at
purpose,
peace and
purpose and
purpose,
peace.
right?
Yeah,
And so I don't feel like he got to teach or anything while he was there, but he still has this ability to pass on what he learned, right? That at the core of the Jedi, at the core of what he would want Rey to be and what the Jedi are supposed to be, are these two concepts of peace and purpose, right? Like, that's
yeah,
like those two words could sum up what the Jedi should strive to be better than any of those books. And so I love that that becomes Luke's legacy. Like, the last thing thought about him was peace and purpose as he dies. Um, that's a really cool way for him to go out, is with that legacy kind of fixed for how he would be
yeah.
remembered.
I
So
like that. And
yeah,
and
good stuff.
nine does kind of build on that too. We'll touch on it a little. It does a
Yeah,
lot wrong, but it handles Luke okay. So I think we'll have some good conversation on that next week as well. Do you have any complaints or grievances you just want to air really quickly, or did you get them all out?
I think we got most of them out. I did make a list of complaints in case we did that. I think we've covered most of them. Oh, um, the fact that they forced Finn with a straight face to say "Let's go, Chrome Dome." That one gets me every time.
Have you seen the deleted scenes
I
for
can't
that?
stand that line. I can't
The
stand it.
deleted scenes are worse.
No,
He
no,
says,
I
"I'm gonna
haven't.
make you squeal like a
Uh,
pig" or something. It's something
oh,
really weird.
well,
And
I'll
real
have to look at them,
quick,
because if that was the best thing,
yeah,
"Let's go, Chrome
it
Dome,"
was.
I got to see
It
what was
was.
not. That's terrible.
Patrick with Poptography hopped in. Hey,
Uh,
Patrick, thanks for
oh,
swinging by.
hello.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I have really my main complaints, and I can do it really quick. So one, the your mom joke at the beginning, um, that's Marvel. That's not Star Wars.
There's a lot of that,
Whatever.
quite honestly.
Yeah. There was a lot of good humor in this movie too. I'll give it that. But that one, but my
Yeah.
one complaint, if I could pick one thing to take away from this movie, it's not the
Mm,
Luke stuff. It is the Finn and Rose adventure to Canto Bight. It is so
totally.
stupid. And now listen, I cannot stand Rose Tico. This is not the actress. I think Kelly Marie Tran is a great whatever actress portraying this role. I think the
Yeah.
people that were mean to her were wrong for being mean to her. But at the same time, I can say that a character is just flat out awful. And it was an awful character. The book, she's even worse. If I had just read the book, never saw the actress, never saw a movie, I would think, my gosh, that character is
Yeah.
the absolute worst. She's overbearing. Her role means nothing at all. then you go to
No.
the casino and you're learning like, oh, these are bad people that give money to both sides of the war. Well, I'm not here to learn about the socioeconomics of the galaxy. Let's forget that and get back to this. Don't really care for it. Is it a humanitarian movie with the space horses? Again, don't care about that in a movie. I'm here to get away from that. So, not really a big fan of that. And then the very end, when Finn is going to drive into that battering ram, and she comes in and like sideswipes him, and her quote is we're not going to win this war by
Oh.
destroying what we hate, but by saving what we love.
Mm.
That is the anti Star Wars answer, because saving what we love was got us Darth Vader. It got rid of the Jedi. Then saving what
Mm.
we love in Episode 5, Luke loses his hand and the Empire freezes Han Solo, and so saving what we love, it sounds good on paper, but in Star Wars it doesn't work. Let Finn drive into that battering ram. That's
Yeah,
my issue there.
sacrifice is a hallmark of how
Yeah,
these Star Wars stories have resolved in a lot of ways, right?
yeah.
And so, yeah, that's I agree with you again. And I told you I liked Rose right at the very start. I thought she was
Yeah,
quirky, interesting, but then like that would have to stink, right? You get brought into Star Wars and they basically just write your character into this like tag along role
yeah.
where you
She
basically
got
just
the
follow
Jar
around
Jar
the main
treatment.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate.
Give us a
Yeah,
Paige Tico story.
I get
That's
that.
compelling. But yeah, that's really the only and I would take
That's
away
fair.
the weird little hand touching with the Raylo thing. That was just awkward. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'd keep the rest. Just, no regrets. I would keep the rest and get rid of Canto Bot and everything that goes with it.
That's fair. I mean,
Yep.
it definitely ties in to other movies far better than
Oh yeah.
Force Awakens.
For
So
sure. For sure. It contributes more to the Skywalker saga than 7 did. We'll see 9. I'm interested to watch 9 now, and I hate that
yeah,
movie.
I
So
know.
I'm kind of excited to watch it. So
We'll
that
see.
that brings us to an end here. We're approaching the hour mark. So
Yep.
Kevin, really quickly, give it a score out 1 to 10.
Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared for that.
I gave The Force
Oh
Awakens a
man.
7, I think, on
Hmm.
this viewing.
Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna give it a. Oh, I'm trying to move past my issues. I'll give it a 7 because I love all the lore connections. I think they're so good. Like just the
Yep.
last little bit of that movie where it ties in so much and that scene with Yoda. And I know it's dumb and cheesy, but I am such a sucker for those two setting suns at the end. Um,
Yeah, that is good.
so yeah,
I'm going seven
I
and a
liked it
half.
better this time.
Yeah, I did too. I liked it a lot better. I'm giving it 7.5, slight leg up over The Force Awakens, just from watching it in this order. I will forever say Force Awakens. I would rather watch it, but just from watching it the way we're doing it, 7.5 for this one.
Hmm.
Take out Canto Bite, I give it an 8, but
Oh
seven and a
yeah,
half.
if you took that out, it would definitely be higher on my list because that's painful to watch.
I think that made
Yeah.
people more mad about the whole Luke thing, because in all the breaks from being mad about Luke, they're just
Get nothing
kindling the
good.
fire with
Yeah,
with
just
that.
making
It's
you
like,
angrier.
hey, does your right hand hurt? Let me smack your left hand too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
See,
that's the issue there.
Force Awakens would have been a lot lower for me if it didn't have Han Solo featured so well in it. I think that's the
It
saving grace for that movie for
would
me.
be like a 5 without that for sure. So, not that great of a
So,
movie, it turns out. So yeah. Anyways, 7.5. Thanks for watching, everyone who tuned in. Otherwise, catch us on Spotify later in the week. We're happy y'all are here. Next week, Rise of Skywalker should be a fun time. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend, whenever you're watching this, and may the force be with you.